Welcome back to our continuing coverage of UFC 200 Fight Week. I'm Ariel Helwani in Las Vegas alongside our own Marc Raimondi. That is Shaun Al-Shatti. We are overlooking the Las Vegas Strip. Of course, we're here to cover one of the biggest weeks in UFC history. But we have some breaking news. It's approximately 9:30 p.m. Pacific right now. Around 80 or so minutes ago, the UFC held an impromptu press conference announcing that Jon Jones, the interim UFC light heavyweight champion, the man who was supposed to headline UFC 200 on Saturday night opposite his longtime rival Daniel Cormier, has suddenly been pulled from the card. He has been flagged by USADA for an out-of-competition drug test that took place on June 16th. He will no longer be able to compete on Saturday night. As of right now, it is unclear whether or not Daniel Cormier will remain on the card, but what we do know is Mark Hunt versus Brock Lesnar is now the new main event of UFC 200. Again, Jon Jones officially off the card on Saturday night. Mark, you were at the press conference. What was the mood like in there when Dana White made this announcement?
I have to say I've never experienced anything like that at any press conference that I've been to. It was, first of all, a press conference was called today very quickly. There wasn't much notice. It was basically get to this area as quickly as you can. No one knew anything that was going on. There was a bunch of media outside waiting to get into a press conference that they didn't know what was going to happen. And once you got in there, the mood was very strange. There were people, there were UFC workers there who were dressed in regular street clothes because this was a very impromptu thing. It happened within, I guess, a matter of minutes, less than an hour, they said. And it was really eerie. It was just a very strange pallor over the entire room. And then when Dana White came up and made the announcement, it was just disbelief.
Yeah, it's unbelievable if you put yourself in their shoes. This is an historic event. This is not UFC, 192. This is UFC 200, something that they have been planning for years. And of course, this wasn't the original main event. It maybe wasn't even Plan C, but this is what they settled on. And all signs, according to the UFC, were that this was going to be a big night for them, pay-per-view wise. It still may be, but this is a massive blow. And this is a guy who has had many run-ins with, drug testing and, of course, outside, car accident a couple times. Jon Jones's resume is not a stellar one. We know that. And we don't have answers right now. We don't know what the banned substance is. He's not talking. There's no statement from his team. And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but what does this do for Jon Jones's legacy? Once again, now, just hours before the main event getting pulled.
I mean, this is absolutely stunning. This is just stunning. And, I want to caution, first of all, that this isn't something where we should throw Jon Jones under the bus and say, because he is innocent until proven guilty. There is, several things this could have been. Ultimately, maybe tainted supplement, or maybe, even B-test comes back positive. There's so many outcomes. This just happened. We have no idea what actually is going on. We don't even know the substance that he popped for. That being said, this is unbelievable, man. This is really unbelievable. There is so much. This week was solely based around that event, and there's so much international media here. This is so much drawing so much media throughout the world, and it's just everything has been leading towards this for a year. They've been talking about this for a year. It blows me away. I mean, the thing that gets me is I feel bad for Daniel Cormier, because how much money did that guy lose tonight?
Yeah.
That guy lost millions and millions of dollars tonight. And they put this fight together, 4 times now at this point? And it just continually keeps falling apart and falling apart. It just seems so snake-bitten. You ask what this does for Jon Jones' legacy. I mean, if this ultimately comes back to where it's some form of PED or something like that, ultimately, again, this is just speculation. I mean, it's a massive hit. He literally ruined what the UFC was hoping what it was going to be, the biggest week in its history. And you have to wonder also, there's ramifications to this. This is a guy on probation.
Yeah.
Steroids are illegal. If this is something, it might affect him. We might not see Jon Jones for years if this is something major.
And to that point, Mark, I mean, you were there when Daniel Cormier addressed the media. I happened to see him as he left the press conference. And of course, no secret, I have a pretty good relationship with Daniel, and I asked him if he wanted to talk, and he almost couldn't speak. He was that distraught. He did tell me afterwards that he's still going to go ahead and keep training. Dana White left the door a little bit open in terms of finding a replacement for Daniel Cormier, which is amazing that he would put everything on the line and maybe get another opponent. But he is trying to sort of move forward here. Can you talk about the kind of mood that he was in? This is a guy who cried in front of the media after UFC 182. We've seen him the highest of highs when he won the belt. We've seen him the lowest of lows. What was his demeanor like as he was addressing the media?
Sullen. It was very different than his reaction when he lost the fight to Jon Jones back in January 2015. I think that was a very emotional Daniel Cormier who knew that he fought a good fight, but he just didn't do enough. This was more disappointment, a missed opportunity. It's not something that is his fault. Someone asked him about the Olympics because Daniel Cormier was going to compete wrestling for the United States in Beijing, and he missed weight. And he said on the dais tonight that was his fault, and he acknowledges that was his fault. This is not like that because this is something that was sprung upon him at the last minute. We're here, we're in Las Vegas. The fight is only 3 nights away. It was going to be the biggest payday of his career. It was supposed to be Jon Jones' redemption fight. It was supposed to be the biggest main event on the biggest show in UFC history. And tonight, Daniel Cormier had to speak in front of media members about why that fight, the biggest fight of his career, will not happen.
Yeah, you don't think about this when something like this happens, but he stands to lose a lot of money, as you said. If you're Daniel Cormier and it's all very fresh, I thought it was very interesting when he said that this feud is kind of turning him into an ugly person and he doesn't like that anymore. Do you go back to this well again? Or do you say, okay, this is the end of the Jon Jones chapter in my life and I just can't do this anymore?
That is a great question. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on what actually happens because this is still all so new. We don't know is Jon Jones going away for a long time, because if he is, Daniel Cormier is 38 years old.
Yeah.
He can't sit and wait for this. This was more or less the last chance to get that vengeance, settle that chapter in his life. If Jon Jones goes away, that's the end of that for Daniel Cormier. You just feel bad for the guy. You really do, because I mean he's been through so much just trying to get this fight and waiting for this fight, and they almost had this fight a few months ago, and just things continually keep coming up. And again, I don't want to harp on it, but he lost so much money tonight, and wrestling doesn't make much money. This guy most of his athletic career was spent wrestling, and he got into MMA really late. He hasn't had much of a window to earn big money. This was it for tonight. And it's all taken away from him in the middle of his weight cut on a random Wednesday night. It's stunning. It's absolutely stunning.
Absolutely stunning, yes.
In a way, this is worse, a worse thing that Jon Jones did to Daniel Cormier than actually beating him in the fight. This is worse. What Jon Jones did tonight to Daniel Cormier, and again, we don't know 100% what happened. We know he failed the drug test, most likely. We don't know what substance that is. We don't know what the ramifications will be. But he failed the test, and if Jon Jones did take something, and this fight, as we know, is now off, it's worse than what would have happened if Jon Jones would have beaten Daniel Cormier, because at least if that fight happened, Cormier would have made millions of dollars. Now, no fight, no money, most likely.
I said to you earlier today, Daniel Cormier brings out the best in Jon Jones in some ways. He's very relaxed. He gets under his skin. Jon Jones almost brings out the worst in Daniel. He's a different guy up there, and fans react to him differently, and I wouldn't blame him if he doesn't want to go back to that well. Let's end on this with you. You've been following USADA's introduction into the world of UFC better than anyone. Is there anything you want to add to this process? What faces Jon Jones? Some people might point back to his cocaine incident. Sure. This can't be cocaine. This can't be a street drug because it was at a competition. Anything you want to add about the USADA part of this process?
Just a few things. I think that when the UFC and USADA partnered up last year, USADA is a third-party partner. They're a partner of the UFC. They're independent, but really the UFC is paying them to do all these drug testing. So there was a lot of questions about, well, will USADA really make the tough calls? Will they pull big-name fighters? They've done a little bit of that already, but to pull the A side of the biggest fight on the biggest card in UFC history means USADA very much means business, and the UFC means business about that. Now, Jon Jones, what's going to happen now is there will be an appeal process. We haven't spoken to his team. We don't know what's going on. I assume that they'll ask for the B sample to be tested. Once that comes back, then they'll be able to move on from there, and a full adjudication process will take place. Now, like you said, it can't be cocaine because cocaine is only prohibited in competition, which means the 12 hours between around the fight. So 6 hours before, 6 hours after the fight. So it can't be cocaine or a recreational drug. It has to be something else, a PED, a diuretic, something of that nature. Again, we don't know enough about it, but this could be a very long and messy process. And if it is something like that, if it is a PED, he could be facing a 2-year ban. That's a very significant thing. And as Shaun noted, steroids are illegal. Performance-enhancing drugs, many of them are illegal, and Jon Jones is on probation, and he's already had 1 probation violation. So that there's also implications there. So there's a lot of things right now that we don't know, but the ramifications, the stakes are very high, and this could be a very long and messy process.
And the one thing that struck me the most as I was watching this develop is you think back to a few months ago. We were in Las Vegas. We were in this very place, and the whole Conor McGregor thing went down. And that was utterly bizarre at the time. And how strange does that look like in retrospect? How petty to pull him because of not showing up for a press conference. You see John Kavanagh even now over Twitter kind of gloating about it. We're going to talk to Conor tomorrow. And I am really fascinated to see how that UFC 202 press conference turns out, because you know that this will pretty much be the focus of it at this point.
Yeah, in a strange twist, Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz are scheduled to be a part of a press conference in a matter of hours from now. They're doing a UFC 202 press conference, which was weird in a way when they announced it in the midst of this craziness. But now here we are. Conor's going to get a chance to speak. This town is filled with gamblers. Who would have, in a million years, bet on the fact that Brock Lesnar would be the guy to headline UFC 100 and now UFC 200? Brock Lesnar now holds the distinction of main eventing those two shows. That's stunning in its own right. I mean, 2 months ago, who would have thought that? And Mark Hunt, of course, is a part of that.
UFC 200, man.
It's an unbelievable story. You know, when they first announced this USADA deal, Lorenzo Fertitta, the CEO of the UFC, said it's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better. I don't know if they ever imagined this. 3 days before the biggest show in UFC history, Jon Jones, the greatest fighter of all time, gets pulled by USADA for an unknown banned substance. Unbelievable. Stunning. We'll be here for the next few days. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for watching our coverage. We'll have plenty more reaction to this unbelievable breaking news. Jon Jones again out of UFC 200. Keep it locked to MMAfighting.com.